Hi, this is Atco and little girl. A little while ago I put out a video called Recording Media Part 1. And in that I made a little overview of the beginning of the recording music back from the end of the 1800s up until the 1920s. In there I wanted to discuss things about Edison and his cylinders, and Victor, that he used his discs, and also when Edison came out with his discs. So that was what kind of started recording music back then. What I want to do in this one is talk about what replaced the 78s. You know, the 78s really became the standard back in the 1920s, and that was basically it. It was the only media that was available, and they were the only one for 20-25 years. Very popular. They did great records. Problem is, though, as we started moving up into the 30s and the 40s, the electronics were getting better and better and better, and we started realizing that we're starting to have more dynamic range that we could make for reproducing from our players than we really could out of the records anymore. I mean, the 78 records had been around for 40 years, and based on a shellac hard type of disc, it seemed to be it was time for an update. So in the 40s, two different companies started to find a new format to replace the 78s. Both of them decided to use a vinyl instead of shellac. The vinyl is cheap, it's light, it's durable, it doesn't wear out needles like the old shellac does, and most of anything you could make a better reproduction. So two different companies were trying to decide what should we use as a replacement. RCA had an idea that, well, you know, since the 78s have been so popular and so successful, let's still make something that's like a 78, it just updated. So they came out with their 7-inch 45 RPM record, and here's a 45, a lot smaller, as you can see. Here's a normal 78, and this is to replace a 45. It'll play just as much, you know, about four minutes, but it's lighter and it's more port durable, and also what RCA wanted to do was have smaller players, cheaper, and wanted to have a automatic changer with it. Now, sounds like a good idea. Columbia thought, well, you know, the problem that we've had too is that, yeah, we can make a charger or a changer, but there might be a better way. And they came up with what they called a long play record. And it's what we know as ones we knew back in the 60s and 70s. Again, this is the 78, and this is the 12-inch long play that came out with Columbia. Now what they thought, their idea was, you know, if we have a one song, that one player that will play more songs, and you don't have to replace, you don't have to change the song all the time. Why not have more songs on one disc? And they made the 12-inch where it will record up to 20 minutes. You can have 5, 6, 7, 8 records on there and have different tracks, and you can just play one after another and not have to replace your record all the time. As well, there was another great idea with that, is a lot of people were popular with jazz and classical songs, and most of those songs are very long songs. So you can play a long song on one record and not have to replace that just in order to play it through. That was a pretty good idea too. So they came out with both of those, and towards the end of the 40s they were introduced. Around 48, 49, both came out. Nobody knew it was going to be the standard, so we'll have to see. For the next couple of years or so, consumers were very confused about all this. I mean, they were used to only having one media out there, so a standard was what they thought would come again. Problem is, which standard do you want to purchase in a player and then find out you're going to have one that's going to obsolete? While we were waiting for that though, a funny thing happened. They were finding different people were buying the different medias. Younger people were purchasing 45s, mainly because the records were cheaper, the players were cheaper, and when people were buying the 12-inch LPs, these were people that liked jazz, liked classical, and wanted to have those longer songs on there. So surprisingly enough, when you're trying to compete with somebody else, both RCA and Columbia decided to hey, let's license each other so they can make their own players that will use both. They can create, they can make records both, because we think there's a business for both. And they did. And so back in the 50s now, there was 3 formats that were very popular. The 78s were still very popular, at least the first half of the 50s. And then the 45s were getting very popular, and so is the LPs. So since the 78 and the 45s were basically the same type of discs, I mean, they both would get a song that was about 4 minutes. The 45s started to overpower the 78's sales, and by the end of the 50s, the 78's manufacturing was ceased. So back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, for disc records, the 45s and the LPs were very popular. At least up until the 80s, when the CDs came out, and they basically replaced the vinyl, at least from mass production. For now, my next video will be Media Part 3, and there I want to talk about all the different tape medias that came out in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Alright, well, for now, I'm going to say goodbye. This is Atco and Little Girl signing off.